Good morning. Welcome to our live talk program. This is Lloyd Grubb here, your host on Revive Reform Radio, doing our live talk program covering finance on this Tuesday. Rise and shine and give God the glory. And today we're looking at a topic: God has been rolling back the power of the King of the North since 1798. God has been rolling back the power of the King of the North since 1798. So, welcome again. Thanks for joining me. Let us pray. Our Father, who art in heaven, I thank you for your word in this day. I pray, Lord, that you may bless us as we study together. And may bless our minds. And this is my prayer in Jesus' name. Amen. So, I'm looking at this topic here again, which is God has been rolling back the power of the King of the North since 1798. And this, we're continuing our theme, which we started yesterday, that every valley shall be exalted, and every mountain and hill shall be made low. So this is what God is doing. And since 1798, as it was a preparation for what we call the antitypical Day of Atonement, when there is no servile work, God has been rolling back the power of the King of the North because that was their primary power. And this we will display in a few minutes. And so this is where our process of meditation will start. In Isaiah chapter 40, verse 1 through 5 is where we get that, or would I say that the theme, which is in Isaiah chapter 40, verse 1 through 5. And it says here, comfort ye, my people, say to your God. Speak ye comfortable to Jerusalem, and cry unto her that her warfare is accomplished, that her iniquity is pardoned. For she hath received of the Lord's hand double for all her sins. The voice of him that cried in the wilderness, prepare ye the way of the Lord, make straight in the desert a highway for our God. Every valley shall be exalted, and every mountain and hill shall be made low, and the crooked shall be made straight, and the rough place plain. And the glory of the Lord shall be revealed, and all flesh shall see it together. For the mouth of the Lord hath spoken it. So the mouth of the Lord has spoken this very important thing here. And when we see this, we really see God's process at work. And when we see God's process at work, we acknowledge God's process at work, and we see God's process here. And so every valley shall be made, shall be built up, and everything that is high shall be taken low. So that's what we believe, and that's what we believe is happening as we peruse here. Just straighten up some things here. All right. So note here in Daniel chapter 12. So where we're going to start now is Daniel chapter 12. I read Daniel chapter 12. And Daniel chapter 12, which is connected to last week, as I say, because this week is a connection to last week. Last week I was just laying some thoughts in my mind to get to this week. And notice in Daniel chapter 12, verse 9 and 10, and it reads, And he said, Go thy way, Daniel, for the words are closed up and sealed till the time of the end. Many shall be purified and made white and tried, but the wicked shall do wickedly. And none of the wicked, none of them shall understand, but the wise shall understand. So you're going to have to judge me here at the end of this presentation, if you stick with me through the presentation, if I understand what's going on. So what I understand what's going on is back to our topic. God has been rolling back the power of the King of the North since 1798. And this power has been gradually being degraded and rolled back. And every attempt by them to institute and to reestablish or to continue with this program or whatever they're doing, their process, God has been just kind of rolling them back or spanking them. And this has been a continuous process by God, because as you know, what the righteous understand is that we're living in the antitypical Day of Atonement. And in the antitypical Day of Atonement, there's no servile work. So that for another day. So that is part of the narrative that we understand. It's different. Now I want to read for you now Daniel 11, verse 40. Daniel 11, verse 40. So one of the things that I needed to do here is I'm just going to show real quickly, I don't know if not quickly, but in a few minutes, I'll cover a span of part of what we're going to talk about today, is just I'm going to casually, so to speak, or I'm just going to read the Bible in Daniel 11. And I'm going to demonstrate to you in Daniel 11 and Revelation 13, Revelation 18, Revelation somewhere. I'm going to demonstrate to you how do you identify just by reading the Bible and perusing your mind who is the king of the north and whose power is being rolled back since 1798. And just by reading the Bible, if you just think you not to do a deep dive or deep study into history, just this history is by reading the news, watching documentaries, studying some history in school, and you quickly can know because the Bible gives you all the clues. Because remember, prophecy is just clues. It's just a clue in symbols. It's a short form. It's like somebody stenographer writes in short form. It's just you understanding in short form really what is happening. So now let's demonstrate this. And the first clue is the big clue. You're gonna know who is the king of the north real quick, and you'll be able to say ding 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 and answer me here. So because if you listen to yesterday, I could tell you, oh, the king of the north is this group of people, and you say, how do I know? Well, it's right there in Daniel 11. Daniel 11 sets it up. Verse 40. Notice now we read verse 40. Oh no, I'm gonna read what the statement about the king of the north first. And notice it says here in Daniel 11 verse 40, it says, and at that time, and at the time of the end shall the king of the south push at him. So the king of the south. So somehow there is a battle going on, and there's always a south, north, south, right? You know, even in our modern times, just this alone should be a trigger for you, right? For you to know who is the king of the north and the king of the south, because normally in our modern times they say is the global south. So well, if there's a global south, who is the global north? Who is Santa Claus? Where does he come from? All right. And so there's a global south and a global north. So he says now the king of the north, the king of the south, sorry, shall push at him. And then he says the king of the north shall come at him like a whirlwind with chariots and horsemen and with many ships. And he shall enter the countries and shall overflow and pass through. So you're not going to be stopped. So if you're looking for clues, you'll be like, okay. North, south, north, south. Where do I hear this? All right. So right there, you get a clue. Even if you're just casually reading, you say, I wonder what is this referring to. All right, keep going. Let's go back now. Pull back now and go back to Daniel 11, again, verse 20. So we go backwards now. Let's go backwards. So we want to know real quickly if we're reading and start thinking, King North, King South. Where do I hear the South North divide? So notice in verse 20 now. This is the big clue here, right? Notice how you can be a person that study prophecy real easily. Notice in Daniel 11 verse 20, then shall stand in his estate a raiser of taxes in the glory of the kingdom, but within few days he shall be destroyed, neither in anger nor in battle. Verse 20 tells you what we're talking about. And if you ever study history, a little bit of history, you know exactly who is referred to as the raiser of taxes and who died, and he did not die in that battle. And we always say is Caesar, right? Caesar Augustus. We always say he's the raiser of taxes. Now that's very interesting because when you look at this, then you start to geographically say, okay, well, who's the Caesars and who's the king of the north? And who are the south? Who's south of that? And are they still referred to as north and south? Is the south-north divide still in existence? So I'm gonna read the text again to you. And this is very important because this is historical. I can't remember if it was Brutus or whatever came into power after. My memory, I always have to read these things to remember. I don't have that type of memory. So I don't have a photographic memory. But if you just casually read, then you can say, oh, I think I know where this is talking about, right? I read it again for you. Then shall stand. So, okay, so the other thing I was just supposed to say, when you read Daniel 11, Daniel 11 is about war, right? War and kingdoms, Daniel 11. And then the whole book of Daniel is about kingdoms. When you go to Revelation, the whole book of Revelation is about war, famine, pestilence. And, kingdoms rise, kingdom fall. So we know we're talking about kingdom. So what we're looking for is not some gospel presentation. Daniel is not per se, except probably Daniel 4. It's not about gospel and all that. It's about power and people who run countries and countries fighting against countries to conquer them, the goat and the ram and all that type of stuff. So that's what it is. So there's a lot of people when they start talking about the revelation of Jesus, they're trying to make it about love, and Revelation is not about that. Revelation is about kingdom and nations and powers and stuff, and that's what God is about anyhow. So notice there, Christ always talk about the kingdom, his kingdom, that kingdom, that kingdom. So notice here, then shall stand in the estate a raiser of taxes. So normally that phrase is very important. Now this is very important for a few points. So there's the Daniel 11 is very important for multiple points. The big issue with Daniel 11, for me, is that when you look at the book Daniel and you look at Daniel 2, and some of the predictions in various chapters in Daniel that even predict the coming of the Messiah, the end of the kingdom of Israel. There's people who claim that Daniel, the book of Daniel, should not be written before Christ, because then that will give the concept of prophecy, knowing the future before it happens, credence, especially the book of Daniel, because when you deal with Daniel chapter 2, it's very clear. So some people have said, because they cannot answer this concept that says something could be written thousands of years ago and outline the future exactly the way it's going to happen. But if when they say this, I think they said the time Daniel, they claim that Daniel was written after the death of Christ. All right. So even if you go there, you said Daniel's written after the death of Christ. Well, Daniel 11 smashed that, because the thing with Daniel 11 predicts going way forward after the death of Christ into our time. And it's exactly on point if you listened to me yesterday and today, I'm going to give you a mountain of evidence casually. Just you're reading Daniel 11. Because then how do you explain all of this? What it's going to say, every single statement is dripping with history and future. And that's how I read Daniel 11. So, and then the other thing, though, the scholars, almost all these scholars that always deny the Bible is from the northern kingdoms. Very fascinating. Because they're in the Bible and I think they don't want to accept that. So when you look at Daniel 11, what Daniel 11 do, why smashes that is also that says scholars and people who do, carbon dating and dating, they claim that the Bible is thousands of years old. So if that's what they're saying, they believe the Bible is not real, but they say it's old. Well, what do you do with Daniel 11? Because Daniel 11 outlines the last 20-something years of Earth's history. So then how do you explain it? It is amazing. And that's how I read it. No, go now to verse 36 with me. Let's skip down a few things. Notice now, Daniel 11, verse 36 through 39 is another fascinating read, because look at the cues. And then you ask yourself the question, who is the king of the north? Notice verse 36. And the king shall do according to his will, and he shall exalt himself and magnify himself above every god, and shall speak marvelous things against the God of gods. So if you were reading that, you would say, who does this? Who is he talking about? What is this king? Notice here, and shall prosper. Very important word in there. So he shall speak against God. He shall be above all gods, lowercase, but the God of gods, uppercase, lowercase. And then he shall prosper. So who speak against God, speak against all gods, and prosper? Notice here, till the indignation be accomplished. What indignation? What was the indignity that the king of the north was doing? And when he came to an end, shortly thereafter, the indignation and the indignity to the gods of gods and to other stuff I'm going to show you in a few minutes came to an end. What? Remember, if this was written shortly after Christ, Daniel 11 smashes the concept that there can't be prophecy. Notice here, for that is a determined shall be done. So whatever is determined will done. You can't stop it. Notice verse 37, just in case you still haven't picked up who is the king of the north. Notice here, neither shall he regard the gods of his fathers. So is the gods of his fathers worshipped a certain god, and he doesn't worship a certain god. Who did that? Nor the desire of women. The desire of women. So what entity don't regard the desire of women? What is the desire of women? Does women want to get married and have kids? Who does this? See, if you just casually read the Bible, there's mountains of evidence. This just one statement at the other. I remember this entity did not exist in the time of Christ. This entity did not exist in the time of Daniel. This entity exists for a certain period of time on earth history and still exists and still doesn't regard the desire of women. Notice here, nor regard any God, for he shall magnify himself above all. Who magnify himself above all? Who is this king of the north? Who is this guy? Who is this person? Who is this seat and authority? Notice here. But in his estate shall he honor the God of force. So he's into war. That's why 3 tribes were plucked up of his own tribes, 3 tribes genocided in the north. Who does this? And a God whom his father knew not shall he honor with gold and silver and precious stones and pleasant things. Notice verse 39 again. Look at the cues before I go to Revelation 30. Notice here. But thus shall he do in the most strongholds with a strange God, whom he shall acknowledge and increase with glory. And he shall cause them to rule over many. Them who? Who does he call to rule over many? Notice here, and shall divide the land for gain. Now, which entity that is in the north that divide land for gain? Remember, we're talking about finance ultimately. So who did this? Who caused them to rule over many? Many who? And divide land for gain. Which entity that is another entity that is a raiser of tax, that did not honor no man, no God, glorified himself, lived deliciously, had all kind of gold and stuff like that, and divided land for gain. Which land was divided for gain? And obviously, this is a Roman Catholic Church led by the Pope, and this is the Roman or the Italian Church led by the Pope. And he did all of this. This is the story of our time. This is the story of the Dark Ages into 1798. Who divided land for gain? What land? The land that Columbus discovered, so to speak. And all of it was divided for gain, for slavery. I'll show you. Keep going. So all these cues are there. In other words, if it was one statement, but is verse after verse after verse after verse after verse, clues after clues after clues, telling you who Daniel is speaking, who Daniel is seeing in vision, or what is seen. We look at the history. There's no other entity that fulfilled these words but the king of the north, Italy, controlling the 7 western tribes of Europe. And what is important, the countries that divided the land for gain are all Western European countries. Somebody say, but Lloyd, Switzerland didn't have any land. And I say, yeah, you're right. That one was baffling me for a while until I realized, Switzerland was the bankers for all the slavery and all the New World. They are still the bankers for all the corruption. So Revelation chapter 13, verse 1 through 10. Same entity being described. We understand that this is the first beast of Revelation 13. This is what we call the Babylon system, the confusion system, what we call the Roman Catholic Church and the Vatican, and every human being that sit in the seat and authority. Notice here the cue is going to be given you again, and you'll see that it's very clear if you just read it and understand a little bit of history and the history about the 7 tribes or 7 kingdoms in Western Europe. Because remember, on the planet, there's no other entity that were colonizers. They are the only colonizers, and they're the ones that were the slave owners. And to this day, they're colonizers. That's why you have South Africa, Israel. Israel is not anything to do with God. It's just to do with Western Europe and the way they think. Hawaii, we can just go on and on. Notice here, dividing land for gain. So that's what they're doing over there now. Revelation chapter 13, verse 1 through 10. Notice here we see here, as we look at, God has been rolling back the power of the king of the north since 1798. That's what we're here preaching. Notice here in Revelation chapter 13, verse 1 through 10. Notice all the things. Just reading the Bible, you can really quickly. Notice you're going to see the repeat of all the language that Daniel used. So John, which wrote John hundreds of years after Daniel writes Daniel 11. And notice John has the same language, same entity, but more detail. 10 verses now. Look at the detail, and if you can see what it is. And I stood on the side of the sea, and I saw a beast rise up out of the sea, having 7 heads and 10 horns. So if you know a beast represent a kingdom, just a wild and tame entity, and if the kingdom is divided in 10, then we know quickly what we're talking about. We're talking about 10 tribes of Western Europe that lost 3 of their head because they genocided each other on the order of the papacy or the Italian leadership. Notice here, and upon his horns are 10 crowns, and upon his heads the name blasphemy. Back to Daniel 11. Notice here, and the beast, which is a secular government or wild government, which I saw was like a leopard, and his feet, the feet of a bear, and his mouth, the mouth of a lion. And notice now, the dragon gave him, and the dragon gave him his power, his seat, and great authority. So in other words, you're looking for a thing that everything he's going to do is satanic, but he's going to have money. He's going to reject God, reject all gods, and his power is going to come from the dragon. Remember, it was the dragon or Satan or the devil, as you can see described in Revelation 12, came to Jesus and said, I'll give you all the power of the earth if you would bow down and worship me. So I believe that this is literally what happened. They made a deal with the devil. Think about it, like um, if you see what's going on in and I guess okay, so I was glitching out here online, but my connection reestablished. Okay, so if you notice, what is the center of like secret society? Because people talk about, oh, there's voodoo and Santeria and all these things in other countries, but what entity and what area that you just have massive amount of accepted, what they call paganism and all kind of stuff like that. So notice here, and the dragon gave his seat and a great authority. And I saw one of his head as it were wounded to death, which we believe is happening in 1798. And his deadly wound was healed, and all the world wandered after the beast. And they worship the dragon. So who they worshiping? So when they go to church on Sunday and they're bowing down to the man, they really worship Satan because Satan gave him his power. They worship the beast and the dragon which gave him his power. And they worship the beast, saying, who is like the beast and who is able to make war with him? So notice here, in Daniel 11, he said he shall magnify force, the God of force, right? So it says it different there. It just says he shall magnify the God of forces, right? It's about war. So then you start to get it. Like if you look, who has been fighting wars nonstop in the last 100 years, last 50 years, last 25 years? Even though they do it, they say, oh, there's a reason for it. It's the war on cancer, the war on drugs, the war on terrorism, the war on communism. It's always a war, but it's just constant wars. Who's been doing it? Every single war. See, but they say, oh no, it's for good reasons. So what, but always it's poor people always suffer. But anyhow, oh yeah, so his deadly wound was healed, and he said, he shall, and who is able to make war? At the end of the day, it's about what? War. That's what they're about. And they say it's a coalition of the willing, and it's NATO, it's UN, it's a war. That's really what it is. And there was given unto him a mouth speaking great things and blasphemies, and power was given unto him to continue for 42 months. So if you look at which entity had power up until 1798 or lost their power, it would be the Catholic Church. is obvious. 538 to 1798, we can see the power of the Catholic Church, and the culminating act and indignity that they did was slavery. If you go back now, and if you look at it, and it says he had a mouth speaking great things. Here in Daniel 11, Daniel 11 just simply says that that he shall speak marvelous things against the God of gods, right? So you see this there, and he shall magnify himself above every gods, right? But he shall prosper until the indignation is accomplished. So when we go here, and it says the devil gave him his seat and great power and all this authority. And he said, who is able to make war with him? And he speak great words, speaking great things and blasphemy. And notice again, power is given unto him to continue for 42 months. And he opened his mouth and blaspheme against God. Notice, and blaspheme his name, his tabernacle, and them that dwell in heaven. That's why if you talk about there's a sanctuary, people say it's a false teaching, because where they got that from? The Catholic Church, from the Pope himself. Notice here, and it was given him to make war. Notice again, the issue is about war, and that's why it says he glorified the power of force, because that's how he came to power, by killing. I think the Vikings and a tribe in Italy and a tribe I think in Spain or somewhere. Can't remember the exact 3 locations, and that's how he came to power. So he was given for him to make war again with the saints. So it's war. Ultimately, the saints is his target, because they are against him. Because obviously, if you listen to me here, you could see why they would be against those who preach like this. Power was given given him over all kindreds, tongue, and people. Hence, when we go back to that Daniel 11, and he says, he shall divide the land for gain. Who did this? It's not Namibia, it's not Peru, it's not Botswana, it's not Russia, it's not China. Who did that? There's only one entity in the world that did that. It's the King of the North. Divide the land for the gain and have power over every nation. It is them and them only. Only few nations escape slightly, so to speak, right? If you look at the Opium War against China, who did that? It was England. If you look, you can just keep going. It just never stops. It's just war. And as I say, it's war against pestilence 19. It's war against, as I say, even cancer they declare war against drugs. The war against drugs will never be won, because who doing the drugs? It's amazing. So notice here, make war against it. Okay, and all that dwell on the earth shall worship him. Who they worship him? Whose names are not written in the book of the Lamb of Life, slain from the foundation of the world. So notice here, there's another thing too. Who's worshiping the system? Is those who are lost and going to hell, right? And if any man has an ear, let him hear. And he that leadeth into captivity, 1798. He that killeth with the sword, 1798. Shall be killed with the sword. So he that leaveth in captivity shall go into captivity. He that killed with the sword shall be killed with the sword. Here's the patience of the saint. Here's the patience of the faith of the saint. All right. So we got another clue. We got some clue there. So casually, you just can't show. Who does this? Somebody say, divide land. Who does this? Chinese never divide no land. So I don't think so. There's no memory of mine that Saudi Arabia was ever a colonizing power. The only colonizing power is the 7 Western tribes or 7 Western European kingdoms. The only slave-holding countries are them again. It's always there. It's a war, every war. Somebody says, but they're fighting war for a good reason. Even wars against cancer. And never the wars get won. It's just war. Just war for war's sake. It is the same entity. You can never, nothing in those texts will ever bring you to some other entity. It probably will be 1 or 2 things. Somebody say, there's some country over here speak against God. Sure. Who is the biggest promoter of homosexuality and LGBTQIA plus and all that? Who does that? Right? Notice in Revelation chapter 18, verse 1 through 4. Notice Revelation 18, verse 1 through 4. As we look at, God has been rolling back the power of the system since 1798. The power just constantly been rolled back. And before 1798, it was war, famine, and pestilence. Notice in Revelation chapter 18, verse 1 through 4, firstly says, "And after these things I saw another angel come down from heaven, having great power, and the earth was lightened with his glory. And he cried mightily with a strong voice, saying, Babylon the great is fallen." Same system. It's a very confusing system. That's why it's so difficult to understand this. Because the system making war, and they say, well, we go to Vietnam and we're trying to fight against the Vietnamese. Because what? Because they're trying to. What did they even go to Vietnam to fight for? They're trying to stop communism. So it's just war, basically. It's just a bunch of excuse for wars. You go all the way across the globe killing people for what? But it's always an excuse. So it's Babylon. It's very confusing because if you say, well, they say, oh, we're here for freedom. Free, how? Anyhow. And he cried mightily with a strong voice, saying, Babylon the great is fallen, has become the habitation of devils. Who live there? Devils, and a hold of every foul spirit, and a cage of every unclean and hateful bird. And somehow when I see this, I see some of these mega churches. that's the thought come to my mind. There's a bunch of hateful and unclean and nastiness. Notice here, for all nations of drink of the wine of the wrath of for fornication, because the philosophies have been enshrined in the educational system. And the kings of the earth have committed fornication with her. She's referred to as a her. Interesting. She's not referred to as a male. She's referred to as a female. I always find it fascinating. Why does the Bible refer to this system as not as a male? It referred to it as a female. Notice here, and the merchants of the earth are waxed rich through the abundance of her delicacies. Notice again, she had power and she had money. Because we are in finance today, right? And I heard another voice from heaven saying, Come out of her, my people, that you be not partakers of her sins, and that you receive not of her plagues. The philosophy and the behavior of the system is what God is against. As you know, Christ came to die to save sinners, as Paul says, which I'm chief. But the philosophies and the behavior is what God is against, and God is working always to roll back. And it's been rolling back. And I'll show you in a few minutes and through the week by God's grace. So notice now, he goes on and he says in verse 11. Now we're going to see the big clue here now. Verse 11 tells you that it's a merchandising system, or we could say it's a capitalistic type system. The whole point of all of this was for money. Remember in Daniel 11, right? It says that he divided land for gain. The whole purpose, was not anything else but for money. It was just a money issue. If you if you look what's going on in Israel, they say it's religion. It's not religion. And most of the people over there, they're Western. They're claiming they're Jew. I don't know how they figure that out. Because it's the same culture. It's the same mindset. They're just robbing the land for gain. It's all about money. Because that's the focal point. So if you go back to Revelation chapter 18, verse 11 now, you read, it says here, and the merchants of the earth shall weep and mourn over her. That's when Lord take her down. Daniel 12, verse 1. For no man buy their merchandise anymore. The merchandise of gold and silver and precious stones, and of pearls and fine linen and purple and silk and scarlet and all fine wood and all manner of vessels of ivory and all manner vessels of most precious woods and brass and iron and marble, and cinnamon odors and ointments and frankincense and wine and oil and fine flour and wheat and beasts and sheep and horses and chariots and slaves and souls of men. Okay. Who did this? Which entity on the globe? If you were thinking, you're thinking, okay, who is the Bible talking about? You say you couldn't get it. You're reading this and you're with your pen, you're with your browser, you're searching, you're trying to figure out. This is symbolic language, I know, but the symbol is telling me that some entity that's called Babylon, that they deal in slaves and souls of men. Who did slavery? See, real quickly there, you can figure out who's talking about. Who did colonization? Who divide land for gain? Who is constantly at war? Whatever the excuse is. Now it's Ukraine, Taiwan, and Israel. It's always an excuse. And they say it's something to do with freedom, freedom fries. It's always the same entity, and it's always the same, and it's always a collision of the willing. Who's a collision of willing? Seven Western tribes with America. It's just always the same thing. A war on terror, war on drugs, war. It's always a war. Who buying the drugs? Who's the biggest consumers of drugs? But yet they're warring against it. War on cancer. Who's dying most of cancer? But it's a war against cancer. You'll be like, okay, why they warring against cancer? But they're the one dying of the cancer. Why they can't figure out why the cancer is coming? Oh no, it's just constant war. It's always about war, because who can make war? Even cancer can't make war with them. So this is what's going on. So notice here, I'll read it again. They trade in chariots and slaves and soul of men. Who did this? And who end up had to stop doing trading in slaves and souls of men? Right? It's very clear. If you just read and you just and don't have an open mind, because probably bad things going there. But if you just peruse your mind and like say, who did slavery? It wasn't Malaysia, so to speak. I don't think they did slavery. Indonesia. Who was dividing line and doing slavery? And then you get your answer. It's the Bible is very clear, and the Bible explains itself if you just keep reading. Notice here. Okay, so now I'm gonna come back now to Daniel 11. Oh, I didn't cut and paste it. So I'm gonna have to pull it. Didn't double cut it. Oh, and my audio, my video, disconnecting from the internet. Okay, so here we go. I was supposed to now bring this here, and I came and it wasn't here. So now I come back now to Daniel 11, verse 40. My text for yesterday. I made a mistake and didn't carry it over. So now if we go back now to Daniel 11, verse 40. And I'm going to read it now, and then we'll see here. Looking at my time. Okay, I have a few minutes. All right, so notice now in Daniel 11, verse 40 onwards. This is a text I read to you yesterday. And we'll see now. Notice it says here, and at the time of the end shall the king of the south push at him, and the king of the north shall come against him, like a whirlwind with chariots and horsemen, and with many ships. And he shall enter into the countries, and shall overflow and pass through. So there, if you take this concept and you see that all the clues are pointing to the king of the north, and it's telling you who the king of the north is by symbol, and you start to extrapolate in history and in current, war, who's always fighting war, whether or not you agree with the wars or not. If you say, I believe, Lord, in the war on cancer, and I believe in the war on drugs, then you can quickly start extrapolating and say, whether or not you agree with why the people are fighting war, you can say, okay, I think I know who's fighting wars, constant wars. War on drugs is war on drugs. And then you start saying, okay, so who's the king of the south? And whether or not you agree with the conclusion, the king of the south, the king of the south is, just go with how Westerners call it. They call it global south, global north. They can say, okay, I think I understand what's happening. But now when we read the rest of the verses, you start to get, again, just some very clear picture. Because you can see now, as I say, if somebody said, Lloyd, Daniel was written, say, 100 or 200 years after Christ died. Okay, so if you go with that, well, how do you explain Daniel 11? Because Daniel 11, especially this verse, is mind-boggling, because he outlined what happened in the last 20-something years to the T. Somebody could say it's just a big coincidence. I know, but it's still fascinating. It happened just the same way. And for me, Ethiopia was was my thing, because I always know the Ethiopians from the Dark Ages always resisted the king of the north, and they always overcome the king of the north. And Ethiopia is always, as I said to you yesterday, loom large in my mind, because when Moses fled from Egypt, he ended up with the Ethiopians. And, the Queen of Sheba, all that type of story. So when you see this, you start to say there's something about that group of people. And they some people say it's also not just, it's their philosophy, mindset, and then also the geographic location is very difficult to conquer them. Okay, whichever way. But still, it stops at the Ethiopians, right? The Ethiopian eunuch. They're somehow always in the Bible somewhere. They always come up, pop up, right? And so I was watching all of this in the last 20 something years, and I was like, okay, everything lines up. I'm gonna read it to you again because I did yesterday, but everything lines up. And when everything lines up, I say, okay, something is going on here because it lines up. And we know who's the king in the north, we know it's the south, and we know there was a fight. Anyhow, let's read it. So at the time of the end shall the king of the south push at him, and the king of the north shall come against him with whirlwind chariots and horsemen and many ships, and he shall enter the countries and shall overflow and pass through. So I interpret that as after anything happened after September 11. And he shall enter into the countries and the land, and many countries shall be overthrown. So we know Tunisia, Egypt, so forth, Libya. As a matter of fact, this is a very important point. And I was reminded of this yesterday, that you never make a deal with certain people. If the people have a very clear history, you never make a deal. Remember, what they were doing, they were sending, I think his name is Scott Ritter. They were sending Scott Ritter. And they'll send in these inspectors, and they'll make sure certified that certain countries don't have a nuclear bomb. And if the history serves correct, Libya had given up their nukes, or given up the concept of enriching uranium or whatever. They give up their protection for certain certification or a certain agreement, and then they came in and killed Muammar Gaddafi just to prove that say you don't make a deal with snakes, because they're consistent until they prove themselves different. They're snakes. So notice here, it's right in that context you get what's going on. Same thing they did with, they make sure control the airspace over Iraq, and you can't have nuclear bombs. And notice the same thing they do in Iran. They want to destroy Iran, but they make sure that says they definitely want Iran not to have a nuke, but they want Israel to have a nuke. Very interesting. So you have one group of people murdering the other group of people, but the other group of people can't have nukes. You see, and they're certified to make sure, yeah, you don't want to have that. And then next thing you're coming, because you're making a deal with somebody that never proven themselves to be faithful. So notice this now. And he shall enter the glorious land. What is the glorious land? And many countries shall be overthrown, but these shall escape of his hand, Edom, Moab, and the chief of the children of Ammon. So as I say, if you look at these things geographically, some people say, well, Lloyd, these people, these people are not really still alive, right? It doesn't matter. If you just look at what Jordan is, I've been predicting it and call it, not predicting, because prediction, I mean, let's say I got a dream or a vision. But based upon the study and based upon history, I've been saying that Jordanians are always going to be good. They're not going to be attacked or anything like that. And that has proven to be 100% correct. Somebody could say, how could that happen? 20-something years. Jordan is fine. Up to this day, Jordan is westernized. Even, as I said, the king is more British than he is anything else. And his wife, I think, is American. And that has been a solid fact. The Bible called, so you could say, wow, how did it happen? Well, it happened exactly the way it says. And I've been saying this for over 20 years now. Jordan not going to go. Watch Jordan, because that's what the Bible says. I just go by what the Bible says. And he shall have power over the treasures of silver and over and he shall stretch forth his hand, and he shall stretch forth his hand. Okay. And he shall stretch forth his hand also upon the countries, plural, multiple. So we're talking about the Bible countries. That's how I look at them. And the land of Egypt shall not escape, but he shall have power over the treasures of gold and of silver, and over all the precious things of Egypt. And this, I told you yesterday, I would do research in it to see what after the Arab Spring on the Obama, which is, I guess, semi-Muslim or something like that. And he's Christian also, and he's black. So, and that's what Obama was fascinating to me. Why Obama was fascinating? Because I want to see philosophy, culture. Is culture the dominating thing, or is it skin color? And what Obama did, he just showed me it doesn't matter who is who is in the papers here, who is in the White House, or who is in whatever the house they have in Germany or England. Same result's gonna come. Snack. Sunak. I was gonna say a snack, but Sunak, which is in where is he? England. It don't matter. It's just the machinery. It doesn't matter who runs the machinery. The machinery will do what it does. 'Cause that's what it does. It's a machine. So it's a cultural mindset. It's colonialist mindset. So that's what's the power. So if you ask me, so what's the power being rolled back? It's the colonialist mindset. It is the mindset that you can divide land for gain, and you're superior, and so you have the right to go to Vietnam and fight them and blah blah. And then from 1798, God just like, listen, whip them and send them back home. You don't have that authority. And that's been happening. So if you ask me, what has been rolling back? That power is a rollback. So if you hear me now and I say, I see something going on in Israel, I'm like, that's the power. If you look at Israel, Israel is not a nation, it's a colonized nation. It's a colonialist mindset nation. And they're going to get rolled back. And that's how I predict. When you see the war in Ukraine and you see like the head of BlackRock and all these investment companies run over there, they run over there because looking for investment opportunity. And I'm like, they're going to get rolled back. That's why I made the call. When COVID-19 happened, I said, this going to roll back some stuff. Well, I remember when this caused me a lot of grief, because I guess when I saw like the German, what is it, Donald Trump into office, and people were celebrating and cheering because he's mocking disabled people and he's mocking, calling Mexican rapists. I say he's gonna roll them back. They're gonna get rolled back. All these racist people from down south, they're gonna get rolled back because they keep how do they say, they're hungering for that power and they want to go backwards. And God said, no, you're going to go forward. There's no such thing as superiority or anybody's better than the other person. And so their power constantly getting rolled back. Every time they try to make a move, God said, no, go back to work and stop the foolishness. So this has been happening from 1790 because there's no servile work. Remember, after 1844, ushering the time when there's no servile work. And just think about this, like they went to China looking for cheap labor. And then now the Chinese are moving forward and they're upset about it. They're mad about because the Chinese, they say, stealing their whatever. But they went to China to steal free labor. Rollback. War on drugs. Flood the black community with drugs. And now the white community is flooded with drugs. Now whites have become the face of homelessness. Just constantly spanking and rolling back. Like, stop doing that foolishness. So every time they rise up and they do this type of stuff, they go into Afghanistan, roll them back. Iraq, roll back. All of it is just going to constantly roll back. Because instead of just do your work and stop going over people's property to steal it, because they follow in the Catholic Church and their philosophy, they keep toying with this foolishness, and every time it just failed. And how you know it was so? Because when you have leaders in the country saying what is Iraq doing with our oil on their ground, or whatever country it was, and you hear people talking like that, you be like, man, they're back to the same thing. They can't give it up. How does somebody have your oil on their ground? So you're going to attack them and take it, right? Many people were saying that the war in Vietnam was just all about power and money and, natural resources and stuff. It is always that. So you just go to a country and come up with a pretext. Oh, you're fighting communism. But at the end of the day, it's just you're going to a country, whether it be El Salvador or Nicaragua or Ecuador or whatever. It's always about stealing resources. And so they'll do it for a little bit, and then God just rolled it back and said, no, 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 no. So what's happening? Because I don't want to run out of time. What's really happening? Because what the Bible predicts is that we're in the antitypical day of atonement, where there's no servile work. And the group that did the ultimate indignation against humanity, which is saying that basically somebody is less than, and they're not created, they're evolved and all that foolishness. God said, listen, I'm going to roll that back. And that's what's been happening. If you hear me make certain comments and stuff like that, that's my understanding. I understand there's no servile work. I'm not pro or against. I just understand the Bible and just look at it that I believe that all men are created equal, and that you have your work to do and I have my work to do. And we can trade and we can barter and we can deal with each other. But whenever somebody or a nation get up in this idea that I'm going to go to somebody's country and rob them and steal them of what they have, and colonize them and enslave them, God's going to roll them back, especially since 1798, or what we will say 1844. And God has been doing that. And it will continue. But I don't think they'll understand it. So they will keep going after, we want Taiwan because of the semiconductors, and we want Ukraine because of They have the gas pipeline and they have fertile land, or we want Israel because we want to steal more, olive groves from the Palestinian. God's just going to deal with that. And that's why we make those predictions, because I think that's what I understand what God's doing. And that's my conclusion. And I'll show you this week what I believe, why God keep rolling them back. So I just summarize that there because I'll get to it as I go to the week by God's grace. So notice here. So notice the aim was to get to the aim was not the Arab Spring, what Obama did. The aim was to get to the gold and silver and the precious things over in Egypt. Libya, same thing. They had oil in Libya, but Libya, they got rolled back. So Libya, when I saw what happened in Libya, I said, oh, you see, because I was looking for it. And when it happened in Libya, and I think they killed an ambassador and stuff like that, and they got shocked. And be like, no, because what happened in Libya, the Libyans wanted to get rid of Muammar Gaddafi, but they didn't necessarily want the Europeans. The Europeans thought so. And notice recently, it's been Mali, Tunisia, and Burkina Faso, I think it is. The French got rolled out of there. It's just going to keep happening. It will not stop. The BRICS, all of this. And we're going to cover some of this in the upcoming months by God's grace. It's just constant rollback, because what it is, it's a constant rollback of this colonized system, because these countries are still in the grips of colonization. They're just like, it been slowly moving away from it. And you're going to constantly see countries that they used to colonize and they divide the land for gain in Europe and in Africa and South America and stuff. It's just going to keep getting rolled back. And that's all it is. So that's where you see Burkina Faso, Mali, all these countries just keep pushing off the Western European empires. France has just gotten a lot of beating recently, and they're going more broke. Italy is always in recession, because that's what's supposed to happen. Let's see if I can get through it. Can I? Okay, yeah. So there's but tiding out to the east and the north shall trouble him, but he shall go with great fury to destroy and to utterly make away many. And he shall plant his tabernacle of his palace between the sea and glorious holy mountain. For the river to the sea, that's what they've been fighting over in America. Because some people are saying they want greater Israel. That's the southern, notice again, it's the southern evangelical pastors, the children of slave owners. They're the ones that keep pushing for this. Oh, Israel need to take over all the land and get all the olive groves because they need to be rich, because they're God's people. Oh, crazy. Notice here. So he shall plant his tabernacles of his palace between the seas and glorious holy mountain. Yet he shall come to his end, and none shall help him. Because notice, all of this activity goes down to one thing, something to do against God. And God said, I'm going to roll you back. And that's what God has been doing. And I'll show you. There's so much evidence of this. Is unbelievable. Every day you can see this. God is like, listen, get to your work and stop stealing people's property. In Psalms chapter 9, verse 1 through the end. Let's see if we can get through this here. So notice here, I will praise thee, O Lord, with my whole heart. I will show forth all thy marvelous works. This is marvelous. I will be glad and rejoice in thee. I will sing praise to thy name, O thou most high. When my enemies are turned back, they shall fall and perish at thy presence. For thou hast maintained my right and my cause. Thou sattest in the throne judging right. Thou hast rebuked the heathen. Thou hast destroyed the wicked. Thou hast put out their name forever and ever. O thou enemy, destruction are come to a perpetual end, and thou hast destroyed cities, their memorial is perished with them. But the Lord shall endure forever. He had prepared his throne for judgment. He shall judge the world in righteousness. He shall minister judgment to the people in uprightness. The Lord also will be a refuge for the oppressed, a refuge in times of trouble. And they that know thy name will put their trust in thee. For thou, Lord, hast not forsaken them that seek thee. Sing praise to the Lord that dwell in Zion. Declare among the people his doing. When he maketh inquisition for blood, he remembered them. He forgetteth not the cry of the humble. Have mercy upon me, O Lord. Consider my trouble which I suffer of them that hate me. That thou that liftest me up from the gates of death, that I may show forth all thy praise in the gates of the daughter of Zion. I will rejoice in thy salvation. The heathen is sunk down in the pit that they made, in the net which they hid it is their own feet taken. The Lord is known by the judgment which he executed. The wicked is snared in the works of his own hands. The wicked shall be turned into hell, and all the nations that forget God. For the needy shall not always be forgotten. The needy shall not always be forgotten. The expectation of the poor shall not perish forever. Praise the Lord. Arise, O Lord, let not man prevail. Let the heathen be judged in thy sight. Put them in fear, O Lord, that the nations may know themselves to be but men. And that's really where it comes down to, that the nations may know themselves to be but men. That's all they are. They're just men, like everybody else. Not superior, not less than, not more than. Just men that need to repent and start, just go do their own work and stop stealing from people. Let us pray. Our Father who art in heaven, I thank you for this day and your word. I pray, the Lord, that you may bless us as we walk humble before thee and seek to be servants of thee and of the people. May you be with us, dear Lord, for Christ's sake. Amen. Well, thanks for being with me here on Revive Reform Radio. Looking forward to talking to you again live tomorrow. We should talk about natural health. Until then, I pray that you may continue to walk with the King.